The Tech Seeking Human podcast is a podcast about AI developed by humans. We're asking the big questions. Is AI going to cure cancer? Is it going to make our lives better? Will it help us improve our jobs? Or will it eliminate them altogether? Potentially even eliminate humans altogether.
Dave, you and drama.
Well, it's possible. So we set off on a journey to interview some of the brightest minds in the world. TED Talk speakers, thought leaders, keynote speakers, authors, journalists, people like
Max Tegmark, Trisha Wong, Hannah Fry, the list goes on.
See, Max actually thinks that the AI could potentially wipe out the human race.
Well, less than 50%.
Join us for the Tech Seeking Human podcast. Subscribe now, hit the like button. This is a really fun episode for me because for anyone that's been listening to the podcast for a little while or knows me, knows I am a Peloton tragic. I quote Aura and Whoop all the time. I've been known to export Garmin, Whoop, Aura data and split it apart and tear it into a million different directions. And so I had a reach out from Max here, who's joining us on the podcast today, and he's starting a company called Velocity AI. And I haven't been this excited for a podcast in a long time, Max. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, Dave, thank you. And for me, this is my first podcast, so I can honestly say the same.
So I gave you the recommendation to get a microphone to get onto this podcast. You sound great. I'm really looking forward to hearing a little more about what you're doing. Why don't you give us, before we hear your background, because your background is incredible, so I want to hear about that. Let's just give the audience a snippet of what Velocity AI is all about. Then we'll go through your background, and then we're going to tear this apart. How does it work? How are you going to compete in this world? What's the purpose of the product? And when is it available and all those good things? So let's start with the elevator pitch.
Yeah, so Velocity AI is a real-time adaptive coach, leveraging proprietary hardware data that we've developed using accelerometers, the same sort of technology that you might find in your AR, VR simulators, and going to a AI that is natively designed that has about 200 milliseconds lag time before it gives you a real-time adaptation. So instead of waiting for data in the rear, our concept is to give real-time performance tracking and coaching for lifters, for runners, and for people that are just trying to follow a performance-oriented nutrition platform.
The inner excitement I have just hearing you say this is like, I want to talk about all of this right now. Give the audience a background. So let's get to know you, Max, before we start getting into the excitement of this product.
Happy to. I'll keep it short and sweet. I grew up in a pretty unique lifestyle. My dad was a helicopter pilot, so he did a lot of contract work, firefighting. So we moved all around the country and even different parts of the world in Europe. So there was two things that I could really attach myself to that I could find anywhere in the world that we were. The first one was martial arts. So my first love was in Taekwondo. I was very competitive in Taekwondo, ended up, getting second degree black belt there, first degree black belt in Hapkido. And I was a internationally sort of ranked second in the world sparring martial artist, and also competed in forums and things like that. But that was sort of my juvenile love. And at around the age of 12 years old, I started to compete heavily in freestyle skiing and joined the international circuit for the free ski world tour, which for those of you that don't know, it's essentially hiking up to the top of typically backcountry, sort of out of bounds mountains and skiing down, and you're judged on a few different measures from difficulty and control and things like that. So, sort of an obscure extreme sport in the mountain realm, but that was my second love and what I planned on doing at the time for the rest of my life. I got into a little bit of trouble. I had a full ride sponsorship at the Vail Ski and Snowboard Academy there, and a little bit of youthful trouble was enough to keep me at the academy, but I lost my free ride for the next year. My parents did not have the money to keep me there, so I ended up moving back home. A bit of a failure at the time, and I had a moment of reconciliation. I had to figure out what it was that I wanted to do next in my life. So I fell back to sort of my first and only childhood dream. You know, at the age of 7 years old, I absolutely admired Navy SEALs. I remember my dad came back one day and he brought me a book about buds, and it was just a bunch of these brutish looking men carrying logs, and it appealed to the inner Neanderthal in me. And when I was doing soul searching and I was trying to find something that would help me become the person that I wanted to be, because I knew that I needed some real change. That was what stood out to me, and so I dedicated the next couple years of my life training to get into that program. I had some incredible former SEALs that helped me along the way, just getting ready because I was certainly not physically prepared for that, and I was by all accounts too young for that type of rigor on the body, and ultimately ended up going to Buds and was successful there, and spent the next 12 years of my life growing up, I say, in the SEAL teams. And in the SEAL teams, for folks that don't know, it's typically a small platoon. You might have 16 to 18 guys in a platoon, and you need to be completely combat self-sufficient. And so after finishing your advanced training, right after you become, a basic SEAL, typically guys will go to a specialty sort of follow-on training. And that can be anything from sniper to your JTACs, the folks that communicate with the aircraft, your communication specialist, so on and so forth. One of those qualifications that you can go to is to go be a medic. You're the person responsible for the health and welfare of the platoon, sort of on and off the battlefield. And that's an incredible program. It's a very abbreviated, very high intensity course that happens over a year, where you leave with your civilian paramedic certification, but in military practice, what you can do is far beyond that. And as a result of that, when you travel, when you are sort of the, the medical subject matter expert, you end up having to dive into a lot of things that you weren't necessarily trained for and certainly not credentialed for. So I was the de facto performance specialist, workout fanatic in the platoon, and I became sort of the on the go personal trainer when we didn't have access to what is frankly some of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the world when we're on our facilities. But unfortunately, when we're on our facilities, that's about 10% of the year. And so there needs to be some sort of continuation there. That began sort of the birthplace of what Velocity AI is.
That's incredible. You're a freak. You like immediately at the start, you the little Australian child in me can't help but say, but you'd be a really good person if there was a bar fight to be standing next to, making sure you were on my side. A Taekwondo champion, someone that has clearly got a lot of nerve and agility to be a near Olympic level uh, skier, and then an elite Navy SEAL that is then also advising other Navy SEALs on their health and fitness. This is like, do you actually even do you look back at your history and go, that's a little unusual?
It's a good question, Dave. I should probably take more moments in life to sit back and reflect, but I don't. There's so much that I want to do. There's so much that I've focused on. I think that in time, I hopefully will be able to do that. But it's been front sight focus for as long as I can remember, and I don't see that slowing down anytime.
It'd be so remiss of me now not to ask a question about the Navy SEALs, just briefly. I don't know how much about it you can talk about, but like the intensity levels, the difficulty, like give us a little snippet of the day in the life of someone that's in the Navy SEALs.
A day in the life of a Navy SEAL could be best described as completely unpredictable. You could go from an environment like we're in right now, sitting in our offices, doing work on the computer, reviewing intelligence documents, doing administrative things that are far less sexy than what people probably imagine, to spending multiple days awake in the field, moving uh, heavy amounts of equipment, uh, combat scenarios, heavy training scenarios, water, sea, all of it, just very unpredictable, and that is the nature of the SEAL teams and all the environments that SEALs operate from, and the training required to sustain that skill set in order to deploy and carry out the nation's objectives. So it is unpredictable, to say the least, physically and mentally exhausting, and very hard to stay on any sort of semblance of normalcy. Normalcy is that unpredictability.
Is there any, look, we only know this stuff from the movies, right? But if we watch movies, there's extreme training that goes into, like, maybe it's like sleep deprivation and you got to get up at 3 a.m, you get thrown out of a helicopter to land into a water to do something. Like, are these factual things that you actually put yourselves through?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would say, I don't know what specific things you might be thinking of, but that sounds very accurate to what the life is, and specifically in our selection training, which is called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. That is where you take some of the nation's most qualified individuals, the most dedicated individuals that are committed to the objective of becoming a SEAL, and you figure out who's actually going to have the moral and physical constitution to achieve it and ultimately end up becoming one. Concept of BUDS is to self-select.
Weed out.
It's to weed out, and what's left at the end are a bunch of individuals, varying in number depending on the class, that would rather die than not make it to the other side and ultimately end up earning their trident. It's pretty interesting.
Talk to me about Velocity AI. Like, where did the idea come from? And
Yeah,
then give us the basics of, like, how is it different? What does it mean? How is someone, when they're using it, why does someone use that versus a Apple Watch or an Aura or a
right.
Peloton or whatever?
Yeah. So answering sort of the latter question before we go into the origin story, what Velocity AI is doing is really providing that real-time layer that's missing from a lot of these incredible devices that, by the way, we are dependent on, and I'll get into that more in the future. But there is such a tremendous amount of data that you can get, and you're perfect example of this, Dave, and so was I, from various devices, and it's very high quality data, but that data is not necessarily actionable unless you have the scientific rigor and guidance to action that data. And that is a real equity problem of information and knowledge that I think is reserved to a very small subset of the population right now. And the beautiful thing about AI, and I love what your concept is, talking about AI as it benefits and as it hinders humanity. I believe that AI, in our case, is a huge asset to the humans that will ultimately end up using this, because we are, yeah, we are bringing high quality information that is currently sort of gate kept by elite level coaches at the absolute professional level. What we've been able to do is take all of that incredible information, distill it down to its mathematical principles that guide it, and build a AI native software that then corresponds to our real time measurement across velocity based training, which is something that's been gold standard in strength training for over 35 years now. But as a result of it being relatively clinical and clunky, you have not seen a suitable, in my opinion, application for the average consumer. There are a few different ways that you can measure velocity right now. All of them require you to go in and sort of manually put in, this is the weight that I used. It, of course, measures the velocity, but then you have to say, this is how many repetitions I did it for. This is sort of my goal. And so it takes time away from, I think, just getting into the gym and training. And there are very few technology implementations out there right now that actually get you away from your phone more and into
Yes.
activity. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we're taking these principles that are known, scientifically validated, and we're automating it for the user so that from your very first repetition, that weight is determined and the increment of it is guided by incredible science that's been around for a long time. So it's very exciting on the velocity front.
This is good. Now let's unpack this even further because this is going to help us break down for the average person. So, I've been working, and I'm going to reflect back on myself just because it's comical almost actually that I've been working out in my own home gym for about 4 years. And then when I travel every now and then, I go to a gym and the world has fundamentally changed. To your point, there are people sitting there spending more time on their phone than there are actually lifting anything. And I struggle to understand how anyone's actually making any inroads with what they're doing. Then a system that gets you going back into the phone all the time doesn't feel natural to me in the same way that actually when I'm on a Peloton and I'm running, it feels natural because it doesn't stop me. It's motivating me and I just keep going. But when I'm lifting, for sure, like, and even Peloton has an app now that you got to input how much weight you did. And they did have a system called a Peloton guide and it sort of guessed, but it still wasn't good. So talk to me about like the use case then of strength training.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does firstly, how do you set the program? How does it know what you just lifted? How does it know how many reps you did? How do you know what body parts we're supposed to be doing? Do you input all of these things at first and set your goals? Like, how does that work?
Yes, that's a really exciting thing that we're doing. So we have a dual architecture AI. So the hot and the cold side, our natural language LLM portion of it is something that will ask a user the exact same questions that your highest quality strength and conditioning coach would ask. And these are things to ascertain, of course, basic demographic information, but also things to figure out, hey, what is your current activity profile like? What is your athletic history? Do you have any major injuries that we need to know about? Those sorts of things that are essential for creating a good plan. And then, of course, figuring out what are the user's goals? Are we training for health span or longevity? Are we training for a very specific goal across conditioning and wanting to keep a degree of strength? For example, I want to run a sub 17:30 5K, but I want to maintain some muscle mass while I'm doing it. Or it could be something as vague and I think relatable as I just want to look good for summer.
Mm.
And the incredible ability of our AI is to be able to take these things and in the process put identifiers to things that mean something algorithmically, and then to be able to aggregate all of that information and create a very personalized and scientifically guided program for the individual based on all of those things and what it is that they want to do, the time that they can commit.
Yep.
And from that point, that's really just the beginning. But I don't want to I don't think that that can be overstated. Just the
No.
importance of having that program built for you and eliminating all of the guesswork.
Because if
And
anyone's done the programs, like I'll interject, anyone who's done any program, they're set to find programs that are not personalized to you. Like it might be, oh, your path to like 42-kilometer marathon run. And you're like, what? No.
yeah,
And then, or it's like, oh, you're the bespoke set training this program. None of them are personalized.
right, right. And I mean, I think that we've all been there, right? Like, in somebody's phase where they want to get bigger, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that hasn't done Arnold's Blueprint to Mass,
Yeah.
a program that he purportedly did in the 80s. And so the fact that we are in this incredible time at the intersection of lots of different fields of technology, and the best thing out there is still to follow other proven programs, is sort of a shame because really what we need to be doing is taking methods that are proven to apply it to different outcomes and then individualizing it from there. And so that's what we do sort of at the basic level from onboarding. And so you have
Yep.
this hyper personalized program that is just the start of everything from here. And because of your sports science background, you're familiar with this term, but for our listeners, there's a term in strength and conditioning and in sports science called autoregulation. And autoregulation is sort of the peak adaptation that you could have, but it's only theoretically possible for the average person.
Yep.
People that have had auto-regulating programs, think of Lance Armstrong in his peak before the Tour de France, where he's got an entire team of human performance specialists that all have their own specialty in what they're analyzing, and they're constantly making adaptations based on his VO2 max his blood oxygen, all of these other metrics, in addition to his sort of caloric expenditure and the nutrition requirement that he has to refuel. And it's a very intensive thing. But the amazing thing about AI is that these are documented mathematical principles that we've been able to distill. And now we have the computation power with the advent of modern smart devices to be able to do this on device, maintain HIPAA sort of standards on everyone's data. That's something I do want to share.
Yep.
We don't have a data selling play at all. Everything is maintained on device and owned by the user, and we are HIPAA certified, and that's very important to me.
Yep.
But from that point and with that sort of information, as long as you have an AI that isn't a GPT 4.0 sticker and it is tethered to these scientific principles, you can start to have a program that is regulating, adapting like a living document based on an individual's measurable data. And so from the biometric standpoint, this was one of the first decisions that I made was we cannot possibly create a device on the heart rate variability, SpO2 measurement, just overall quality that you find with some of these 10 plus $billion valued companies like Aura and Whoop.
Yep.
So I looked at doing sort of server to server connections and what that would look like to do some sort of API integration, while also simultaneously chasing this avenue with Apple and figuring out how we could potentially license with Apple to pull some of this data from Apple. It's easy to share to Apple Health. It's a bit harder to pull from it for good reason, and particularly if you have AI. And so that was a big win for us when we were certified from Apple to pull all of their data into our system. So that allowed us to focus on what is not being delivered on from Whoop, Aura, from any of these wearables, which is specifically the ultra low latency and incredible accurate velocity based measurements. And so with this program, you have a personalized program, and every single time that you do your workout, we have real time data from your projected output. And that's the incredible thing about velocity based training. Uh, it uses the formula for power, which is power is equal to force times velocity. And it's not quite so simple when it comes to kinesiology. So there has to be this, this database that is accumulated through studies on how does that formula translate with actual human, uh, kinetic motion. And with those minimum velocity thresholds, they're called, you can actually associate a certain percentage with the speed. And so that's what velocity based training does. It completely removes the antiquated concept of doing a percentage of a static 1 rep max that you have in time, which is how typical programs work. And it gives you a real time projection of where you're at that day. And people really latched on to the significance of heart rate variability for good
God,
reason,
I've only
right?
mentioned it 3 times today. I had training earlier today and I'm like, I think I'm the lowest HRV on the planet. She's like, you can't compare it to other people. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm 13 to 16. And she's like, oh my God, that is bad. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have gin at night. Maybe, Dave. Keep going.
Right,
But yeah, HR variability is what, for anyone that doesn't know, heart rate variability is it's like your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. It's supposed to be a measure. If you're a little bit higher, it's better. It means you can chill out a little bit and you're recovered.
right,
Am I
right.
sort of correct? Like if you
Yeah,
have low, it tends to mean you're not really very well recovered. And I'm
yeah,
pretty sure that's what Whoop and Aura are using, along with heart rate data, to understand your readiness for training.
right, right. Absolutely. I mean, one important disclaimer to put on that is comparing one's HRV to another person is not always the best way to do it, and it's because everyone does have sort of um, an individual average that matters more than comparison to another person, and so
Unless you're like
generally it
me
is
and you're
true.
really, really low.
Right. So to make you feel better,
Yeah.
what is your average, and then the measurement, that sort of deviation from there is what we're looking at, and that's what Whoop and Aura do exceptionally well. But previous to Whoop and to Aura, heart rate variability was in the clinical setting only. You saw it in sort of, you know, cardiac ICU, post-stroke sort
Yep.
of care. It was very valuable there. And I think the genius thing that these companies did was being able to know that this has an impact outside of those acute sort of medical emergencies, and that they don't need to explain to human beings what heart rate variability is. They don't need to say sympathetic or parasympathetic at all.
Yep.
People's eyes will glaze over. But if you tell people that from that measurement, you can get a pretty good idea of how well recovered you are and how ready you are for activity, that's an amazing thing. And obviously, it sells so well because it does matter. What we're doing is going to that next step. Now, we can measure what your total power output is without you ever having to hit it. And that's what VBT measurements do. And so I think on a more accurate level, VBT shows you a human potential from a power and force output that heart rate variability cannot.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean that we discount heart rate variability. And so our algorithm and our program does take into consideration all of this biometric data because it does have an impact on perhaps how long somebody's going to be doing cardiovascular activity. Or if they didn't sleep at all, perhaps we're going to reschedule their workout, and that happens on an automated basis. But the real power, no pun intended, with velocity-based training is that we don't have to try to consider the thousands of variables that can impact your total power and force output for a day. We can just measure it at a weight that's safe and easy for a user, and then we can adjust the load management based on the stimuli that's meant for them on that day. And so the question of should I train? How hard should I train? I think standard things that everyone has dealt with is completely eliminated.
So let me get a recap, and then I want to understand. The next question we're going to go down the path of is how do you keep recalibrating? Like if I'm going to do a workout, how is it capturing what it is that I lifted and how successful I was lifting that particular day, as well as the disciplines? You also mentioned at the start it's not just lifting, there's potentially running maybe or a few other things. But I wanted
Yeah.
to go back because do you have hardware? But you also can tap into an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
You can tap into maybe other devices, but you also have hardware as well?
Correct. Yeah. We are a hardware company. Our hardware is, and I'll show if anyone's watching the video here. This is sort of the initial prototype, and that was
Yeah.
built with a 3D printer in a
Yeah, cool.
garage. And our devices have come a long way. We actually have our first sort of production run that's happening right now, which is very exciting. But this hardware is how we measure the,
Yep.
the, the velocity. And Apple Watch, Whoop, none of these devices have the quality of gyroscope that we need with the latency required for true rep by rep adjustments. And so we needed to create it on our own because we don't want to be a performance dashboard that you see at the end of your workout. We want to make coaching recommendations right there in the moment. And so faster than you can think, our device communicates to our software, and our software figures out the math behind it all, and it makes the recommendation for, hey, we're staying at this weight, we're not, we're increasing the total volume, we're not, we're going up and down, and if we're going up and down, by exactly how much, and it's mathematically guided. Sorry about that.
How's it doing the weight? Because if I'm like, I don't know, I'm doing bench press, obviously you can get the velocity of how fast I'm pushing, but how are you getting the like power of what I'm actually lifting? Do you need to input that?
Yeah, you don't have to input that because taking it back to sort of the first aspect of this, the workout is being created for you by the same engine. And so it is giving the recommendation for where you're starting. And every increment from there is also guided by the device. And so you don't have to go in and manually input, I did 135, and this was the known velocity measurement. I did it for this many reps. it knows what weight you moved at which speed, and therefore makes the recommendations from there.
So it knows, like, if I'm having a day and it told me I need to lift, I don't know, 30 pounds on the bicep curls and I'm supposed to be doing 8 reps and I stop at 5, it knows that I've stopped at 5.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, we have over 225 exercises in the library. I will say that for us right now, the the scientific rigor that we have behind all of this is totally uncompromising. So the humans that have helped this get to the stage that it is, we have Casey Glass, who is the lead strength and conditioning coach for the SEAL teams on the West Coast. Absolute incredible mind who I was able to enlist on this project to help me with the meta-analysis and the mathematics behind this, then turning it over to the engineers that we had developing this out. And when you bring on someone like that that has uncompromising scientific standards, we cannot do anything that's not validated. And so one of the current constraints of velocity-based training is that it's only been tested by these elite level of sports that I keep mentioning.
Yep.
And so the studies have been done on your most important foundational compound movements, your deadlift, your squat, your overhead press, your bench press.
Yep.
But there are there is not enough data and to determine minimum velocity thresholds on exercises like bicep curls because it's been considered sort of unimportant in the performance realm. But we
Oh,
plan on when we have our user base that's big enough,
the beach
having
muscles.
yeah, we have a
Making sure you cater to the beach muscles.
yeah, what we so we will have studies done, participants that are using our devices that we have. Hey, you're just going to keep the device on for these movements, and we will get enough data in a way that no one else has been able to be able to then create minimum velocity thresholds so you can have those VBT principles across more exercises than are currently scientifically validated. But it's very important, I think, to note that when it goes outside of those core movements, which are absolutely the most vital of the lift, then
Then
we
what, you change
go
it.
for the
Yeah.
rest of the program, yeah,
Yeah.
to rate of perceived exertion, reps in reserve, and sort of secondary methods to
And it's funny when I do Peloton, the instructor is always just like, I don't do bicep curls. What do you need bicep curls for?
we've got nothing against lifting for aesthetics. That is a component of what we're able to do. We just can't we just can't tell people that the science is
Yeah.
there to be able to
Good.
determine minimum velocity thresholds yet, but we'll absolutely get there for those sort of movements that it hasn't been tested on. But yeah, man.
But like, so straight, like, talk about the movement. So you said, like, there's nearly 200 types of movements, but there's strength is one of the core disciplines. Are there aerobic based fitness disciplines included?
Yeah. So our current MVP version has just running, right?
Yep.
And we're using data that's been out, ways of training accurately with running that you'll find on a lot of different running platforms. But what is unique to us is that this isn't a strength and conditioning program. This is a holistic program, if you wish it to be, that has an intrinsic understanding of the load and demand and the performance across both, and then the recovery as a result of it. And so this isn't like taking a lifting app and then using Strava for running. To have it under one engine, just
Yep.
like elite athletes do with their human performance team, is sort of that
Yep.
next level that we have here.
Talk to me about pricing models. When is it
Yeah.
available? How do we get access to this?
Yeah. So the last thing that I want to mention before we get into pricing is the nutrition component, because
Mm.
you've probably dealt with this. I think that anyone that's really taken training seriously before has found that nutrition is the most challenging thing to plug in with it all. How do you calculate how many calories were expended specifically in lifting? It's a bit more challenging. And, current wearables are notoriously inaccurate, maybe accurate to plus or minus 500 calories, which happens to be exactly that range that you would be targeting for either a bulk or a cut. So it doesn't do a lot of good if you want to be really specific. And so what our system does is it knows the load and caloric expenditure based on the user's demographics. And the more data you can get, the better. If you wanted to put in a DEXA scan then we would have a really, really great starting space. But for people that don't have that, just height, weight, and some basic information there will get you a lot further than people currently have right now, because that system is calculating the load and the caloric requirement from that, and whatever the workout is that was designed by the same system. And so we have performance nutrition that is a specific calorie and macro recommendation up to the minute that you should be eating it or
Oh,
consuming it
wow.
before the activity, and what the right calorie and macro recommendation would be post for recovery. So it gets very, very detailed in that sense. And I think the nutrition component is really important to highlight as well, because our goal here is that when you get this application, that you have a one-stop shop for whatever it is that you want to achieve through physical training, and that you know that everything is scientifically guided, it's measured, and it's easy to follow. We also have a feature that schedules your workouts around your calendar. So it can import sort of blind time blocks from your Gmail, from your Outlook, whatever.
Oh,
Because
wow.
I've found in the private sector, when I don't have 2 hours a day given
Yep.
to work out, it's hard to figure out when to work out. And so
Yep.
this will read calendars, it will schedule the workouts. If you don't have a time slot big enough for the workout that was planned, it will adjust the workout, and then it will put that intensity and volume on another workout where you do have time, all in the background. Another feature that we have, because this is built for your life, is if you go to travel and you go to a hotel gym, and your hotel gym doesn't have the same equipment as your normal facility, you can input the gym equipment that you have now, and it will restructure your program, still oriented to get you to achieve your goals with the equipment that you have available. And that can be all the way down to bands if you're in that sort of environment where you don't have much at all. So
Wow.
those are some exciting other features I wanted to touch on.
Wow.
Yeah,
Does it do do you do oh man, what was I gonna say? Uh uh voice based, or is it all chat at the
yeah.
moment?
So if you don't want to look at your phone, the phone does have an incredible dashboard where you can see like an accelerometer where you're at and in your velocity. And that's fantastic because it gives us sort of secondary benefit
Dude.
of being able to
Yeah.
compete with yourself on
Huh.
output, which I find to be much more stimulating. But if you don't want to have your phone out, this will give you audible chimes in your earphones to tell you that you're in range or not, what your next exercise is, or specifically on bench press, it's hard to look at your phone. And so if you have your
Yeah.
phone, it will tell you some nice satisfactory chime if you're in the recommended range, or if
Huh.
you need to change, it'll give you what that change is, all without you having to look at your device. To answer your question on pricing, our first year's pricing, so this first launch is going to be 149 for the
Wow.
hardware, and then we're doing a 19.99 uh, software fee. So the app
Yeah.
on iOS is going to be 19.99 per month, and there's no like extra sort of charges or anything like that. We want everything to be very affordable, so we came in at a price that I think is super reasonable for folks, and I think gives them some real value.
I am in. When's it launching? Has it launched? I saw you were out, but are you in beta or are you out?
We're in beta trials right now. We have a couple different SEAL platoons and a Green Beret element that's using this as our sort of final trial for debugs, and then we're launching our product this quarter in July to the mass market, to the consumer.
To be on the list. Make sure you let
You're
me
on the
know.
list.
All right. I want to
Consider
get out there.
yourself on the list. Yeah.
Mate, this is so good. I'm really excited for you. I've got to get you back once it's launched, hear about how it's going, what's coming up with the product, what adaptations you're making. There's so many good things to dive into for like, how are you analyzing? How do you know which features, the feedback people are getting, how are you rolling it out? All of these things really excite me. But I think you've hit a really interesting niche here. You've hit like, I think back to my training days of like, yeah, we had like really good programs. We had elite instructors. You had really, well, at the time, even we had pretty good software. But that now with AI, this is like completely personalized. I'm like, I want to almost reserve judgment until I get this thing, and
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah,
be
man.
straight
Absolutely.
into it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to get you on, and Dave, thank you for having me. It's been an honor to talk to you, and a fantastic conversation. Look forward to the next one.
I absolutely loved it, man. Good luck, and I'll chat to you again soon, all right?
See ya.